Hello and welcome to Global Order. My name is Ishan Dhar. In his statement on July 2nd, 2025, in which His Holiness the Dalai Lama affirmed that the institution of the Dalai Lama would indeed continue, he rather importantly reiterated that the Ganden Phodrang Trust has the sole authority to recognize his future reincarnation and that no one else has any such authority to interfere in this matter. But what is the Ganden Phodrang Trust? Who are its trustees? And what challenges might they contend with when His Holiness's succession is upon us? Joining me today to delve into some of these rather important questions is an extraordinary figure. Mr. Claude Arpi is an eminent historian and Tibetologist who is currently a distinguished fellow at the Center of Excellence for Himalayan Studies at the Shiv Nadar University. Stay tuned for what will undoubtedly be a fascinating conversation. Mr. Arpi, welcome back to Global Order. It's a pleasure to be able to speak with you and engage you on this subject.
Yes, good afternoon. Yeah.
So, sir, before we get into the specifics around the Ganden Phodrang Trust, let's just backtrack and look at some of the basics. There was a statement by His Holiness in 2011 concerning his succession, and now we've had another statement on July 2nd. What do we understand about what the succession process might look like now? Where do the things stand from where you see them?
I'm not too sure because the July 2nd statement earlier this month was rather brief and not very detailed. However, it clarifies one point which is very important, is that the only organization who can decide for the recognition and later on education of the young 15th Dalai Lama is the Ganden Phodrang Trust, and he repeated it twice during this. Right. Now, you mentioned the November 2011 statement, yes, which was a very detailed. And in this statement, he mentioned the two possibilities. One is the traditional reincarnation, that the Dalai Lama dies and a search party is formed, or now which correspond to the Ganden Phodrang Trust, and they start looking at sign or whatever the Dalai Lama has left. Right. There was a second possibility of an emanation. And it seems in the July 2nd that this possibility has been dropped. Traditionally, the 14th Dalai Lama have been recognized by reincarnation, not emanation. Correct. But in some cases, in the Tibetan Buddhism, emanation has taken place. And I think several years ago, the Dalai Lama's office, now called the Ganden Phodrang Trust, we used to call it the private office, had done some research, had commissioned some research to know more historically about the emanation. Emanation, in my views, have had the advantage to cut that gap, which has been in the history of Tibet, particularly in the 19th century, that gap of 20 years, between 20 years or so, it can be 25, it can be 18, but the gap between the time the Lama passed away and the time he is able to lead his followers. At that time in the past, the Dalai Lama had the temporal power as well as the spiritual power. Now in 2011, also, a few months before the statement for reincarnation, His Holiness made it clear that he relinquishes temporal power and he wants an elected leader to be voted in by the people, the diaspora, all the people who are outside Tibet today. So it was at happened first, Lobsang Sangye, now Pampa Batsering are the temporal leader, the Sikyong, who are leading the people. That way, the functions of the Dalai Lama have been divided. So now we are speaking only about spiritual leadership. So the gap, we can speak about it later on again, but this gap for me is a serious problem because as you see the world today, the speed of the world is accelerating every day. And we really don't know what is going to happen tomorrow. It's not like in 11th, 12th century when the first reincarnation of the Karmapa, the reincarnation of the first Karmapa was found. And later on, when the first Dalai Lama reincarnated, at that time, you had the luxury, for example, when the fifth Dalai Lama passed away, his death was kept secret by the regent for 15 years or so. Oh, wow. That's why our Mompa, Dalai Lama Tsangyan Gyatso, the sixth Dalai Lama, was recognized very late in his life. So that is a luxury of hiding, or today it doesn't exist.
Yeah, we don't have such
world media. We have Twitter, Instagram, all these social media things, which makes that every news, whatever happening, is spread all over the world in a few minutes, including rumors, unfortunately.
Correct. Since you brought up the gap, let's delve into that a bit more. As you said, His Holiness relinquished his temporal role to the elected office of the Sikyong. So at least on paper, this is now strictly a religious role. Now that the succession process, granted His Holiness is still with us, seems to be veering into the traditional reincarnation method, which would presumably mean we will have this 20-odd year gap that you are worried about. In exile now that the temple role is gone, presumably we will not see regents again. What risks are inherent to this process in the current context as far as a gap goes?
I think you say we will not see regents again, but we will have a council of regency. I call it a council of regency. His Holiness call it Ganden Phodrang Trust.
Right.
He has nominated 15 trustees, some at the time of the creation of the trust, some more recently. A very interesting move that he has added 4 young Lama who are the future generation. They are 35, 40, like Ring Rinpoche and Dzonglen Rinpoche, Kundeling, and Changyan Rinpoche. So he has introduced very recently these 4 Lama, which also bring the spiritual aspect, because the Ganden Phodrang Trust till now was more for as administrative purpose, in the sense that most of the other members are the secretary who have looked after the affairs of the Dalai Lama all over this year, and we are very competent in this. But apart from the Professor Samdong Rinpoche, who is the main person in the Ganden Phodrang Trust, with His Holiness as a chairman, but others had less knowledge in spiritual matter or in deeper esoteric matter, like finding the soul of in a young boy of the deceased leader. So, but to come back again in the gap, if you take, I am not expert in esoteric issues, or but I have studied a little bit of the politics and the history.
Well, that's an understatement. You studied more than just a little bit.
But I see, like, if you take 19th century, between 1805 and 1875, we have 4 Dalai Lamas.
Right.
8, 9, 10, 11, 12. No, sorry. 9, 10, 11, 12. It means that these Lama, none of them lived up to the age of 20, 21. Means none of them were able to give a leadership. And this period of time has been used by China to infiltrate the administration in Tibet and bring their own sort of, China has been always good at influencing.
Right.
We see it today in Harvard University, but it's not new. In 19th century or much earlier, China has been able to infiltrate. And the time they really controlled the Tibetan administration was in 19th century. So some people will say that's a rumor, but some people say that they found a way that if the Dalai Lama passed away at the age of 18 or 19 or 20, the whole process starts again. Now, because after the statement of 4 July, I don't think it can happen, because that Council of Regency or Ganden Phodrang Trust will make sure that these things doesn't happen. But again, the world is going very fast, and the world changed too fast, maybe for to give the young boy the possibility to give a lead to his own people. He will give in one way, but if you take it from outside, for the Tibetan, there's no problem in the sense that they will recognize him. If Samdang Rinpoche one day announces that they have found the Dalai Lama, everybody will
accept it without
accept it. He will have full legitimacy, and the Tibetan will be happy. They will follow him. But it may not be the case of the other foreign governments. Like last week, the Czech president went. If he was a kid, I'm not sure that the foreign president,
head of state, would visit.
If he goes to America. You see, what has been remarkable in the life of the 14th Dalai Lama is after 1973, he started traveling abroad. He went first to Italy and met the Pope, Paul VI. So first thing, but it shows that one of these 4 commitments of religious harmony and to dialogue between the different faiths already was very much into his mind. He went to see the Pope. And after that, he went to Switzerland and some different European countries. From that time, only in 1979, he went to the US, but he traveled every year. He traveled 5, 6, 7, 8 countries. So it made the Tibetan cause, even if today he is not asking for full independence, that some Tibetan would like him to ask for full independence. But whatever, if he goes to Washington, he would be invited by the State Department. In a few cases, some cases, he was invited at the White House. Yes. Similarly, if he goes to France, he can be invited by the parliament. The parliamentary. Now, in my view, I'm not sure that a young boy of 6, 7, 10, 12 years old will be also recognized. It made a very big difference for the Tibetan cause to be known all over the world. So that's one of the thing that we can think of.
Yeah, that is actually something I even brought up in the previous interview. Now you've touched upon it. His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama is perhaps the first Dalai Lama to really have a stature of global relevance, where even entire communities of people who have no traditional connection to him will throng to see him when he used to travel abroad. Do you think the successor will inherit that global relevance, or is that too difficult to say?
I'm not able to do divination. And
absolutely.
In many cases, sometimes the successor is less good. But Tibet was very, very fortunate to have 2 successive very great Dalai Lama, 13th Dalai Lama, who first actually was the first to travel. He came to Kalimpong between 1910 and 1912. He had gone earlier to Mongolia and China.
Yeah.
And so he was the first to travel. He wanted to open up Tibet, like he wanted to Tibet to be part of the League of Nations, which was the precursor of the UN. And unfortunately, there was very conservative force, mainly the big monastery in Tibet, who didn't want their religion to be touched, they thought it will spoil their religion to have contacts with the world outside. They didn't realize, again, that the world was moving very fast.
Right.
And if you look in 1949, 1950, when the PLA, the People's Liberation Army, entered in Western Tibet, in Eastern Tibet, sorry, in Chamdo in October 1950, Tibet till that time was de facto independence. There's many in the writings of the Prime Minister Nehru, he said Tibet verging independence, de facto independence, at least since 1912 when he returned to Tibet after his exile in Kalimpong. And so at that time, all the Asian countries, all the African countries were under the yoke of foreign powers. And from 47, we witnessed India's independence, and somehow China also stood up, and Mao Zedong came in power and declared on October 1st, 49, the People's Republic of China. And all the Asian countries started emancipated. In some of these colonies, like some of the French colonies in Vietnam or Tunisia or Maghreb, it took a little bit more time, but eventually everyone became independent. And Tibet, who was independent in 47, 48, 49, became a colony of China. So there's an irony I've never been able to explain, though long ago I wrote a small book, The Karma of Tibet, I think partly because Tibetans were not united in their fight for their own nation, and also difference of perception among the different schools of Buddhism. So today, that issue of school of Buddhism also will come into play in the succession of His Holiness, I think.
All right, that's an interesting strand that you came up with. You said the different schools of Buddhism might come into play. In exile, His Holiness has sort of been a purporter of what they call the Rimé movement. So that the Rimé movement, so that the different sects are more united. So I guess to prevent sectarianism between the different schools of Tibetan Buddhism.
I think if you look,
how do you see that playing into
60, 70 years of his life?
Yeah,
I think is his main contribution to the Tibet. I don't call it Tibet cause, but it's the main contribution. In the sense, he has been able to reunite things which have never been united, like all the Kham, Hamdo, Yutsang, the central Tibet province, and separate administration. Kham had small principalities who were running more or less independent show without much reference in the past to Lhasa.
Right.
So His Holiness has brought together. Now you have Pemba Tsering, the Sikyon is from Amdo, like His Holiness, very close to the Chinese border in Qinghai. Professor Samdong Rinpoche is from today's Yunnan in Kham. Domanyari, the security minister, the second most senior minister in the cabinet, she's from Kham. So, and you have people from all this. And in the assembly, when His Holiness came, he started that Tibetan People's Assembly, and he gave seats for the three regions. 10 seats, 10 seats, 10 seats, and he gave 2 seats each to the 4 main Buddhist schools, and 2 seats for the original faith, the Bon. So he has been uniting factor for Tibet. And this, I think the Tibetans should be eternally grateful that nobody before him has been, except maybe in the time in 7th, 8th century of the great kings of Tibet, Sonten Gompo, Tritson Detsen. After that, Tibet has been more not united like it is united today. Even people within Tibet today, of course, they can't express themselves, they cannot say anything because the monitoring by Communist China is so powerful, so well-oiled that it is they can't speak. But on certain occasions, we have seen that the people of Tibet, they are, and people from Kham or Amdo or everywhere, they are behind him. So now the question is for the succession. Will the successor be able to do this? I don't know. Yes, I hope so.
Now, coming back to the Ganden Phodrang Trust, you spoke about the composition. You talked about the 4 young Rinpoches or Lamas that had been added as trustees this year, who, if everybody's deductions of timelines are correct, are probably going to be the leading actors in the search when it does happen. What challenges do you think they will face as they embark on this process?
First of all, His Holiness said last few weeks that he will live up to 130 years. So if he lives 130 years, these young Rinpoche also, they will be 85. It's in 40 years from now, 80 or 85, like that. Professor Samdong Rinpoche will be also 135. So 125. He is 3-4 years younger. So what people don't understand very often, that the process starts only when the leader pass away. You can't start finding the reincarnation or the entire process that we may discuss later starts only after the leaders goes. And it takes 1 year or 2 years. Like 13th Dalai Lama passed away in 1933. Right. The process started in 1935. And Reting Rinpoche, the regent, the first regent, there was, during the regency, there was 2 regents, Reting Rinpoche, Tatra Rinpoche. By the way, they're both in China today. But the time it starts, and he deciphered the sign giving direction to look for the 14th Dalai Lama. It took 3-4 years. Right. Eventually, he was brought in 1939 in Lhasa and enthroned in 1940. So that process also can start only after. So right. I don't know if we start process. His Holiness may, even if he doesn't live 40 years, he may live 15 or 20 years. So correct. We have seen that in Ladakh, he is in Ladakh since 1 week. He is very, very, very active, much more active than Dharamsala. I think some people say the climate, he likes the climate and he likes the altitude and the cold. He landed in Leh, and the next morning he started receiving people, and he has been 3-4 days in Zanskar. In Zanskar, there was 21,000 people to receive him, and if you look at that, the geography and the population of Zanskar itself, it's a very, very small, I mean, it's a large area, but very...
so it's almost the entire populace.
Is less, no? Yeah. So 21,000 in Zanskar, it's enormous. So that shows against the legitimacy of the Dalai Lama, that everyone, including political leaders, have been going there, that the chief minister of Arunachal Pradesh went there. And so this, I think, you mentioned about the challenge. Mm-hmm. I think one of the challenges is to bring on board all the other religious schools. So it's mentioned in the statement of 4th July that the Ganden Phodrang Trust will consult the other religious school and will consult the oracles or the deities or what the protectors of the Dharma. So that is mostly Nechong and one or two other oracles which are in Dharamsala.
Right.
But to bring together the religious school, I think it's the most important and the most difficult also. So that will be one of their main tasks to the Ganden Phodrang Trust, because we should not forget he is not the Dalai Lama, he is a Dalai Lama of Tibet, but he is a Dalai Lama of all the Tibetans.
Right.
So though he belongs to the Gelugpa sect, the yellow sect, he is also the Dalai Lama of the Kadyu or the Nyingma or the Sakya. And I think it was interesting that during 3 days between 2nd and 4th of July, there was 120 very senior lamas who assembled in Dharamsala, who had a conference. And his statement actually was the introduction to that conference. So all the schools were represented. So because in the past, each of these schools have gone on its own way, have selected their own lama, had their own estates or the labrang or their own monastery or their own followers or their own today's Dharma center in the West. So it has to come in one way also under one leadership. Loose leadership, that in the sense that Dalai Lama will never interfere deeply in the matter of the Nyingmapa or the Sakya, but they should move together. No, I think that meeting was important from 2nd to 4th of July to bring together most of the senior religious leaders, and they stood by His Holiness declaration. Now, when he's not here, it is certain that it's a factor we should not deny, that China will try to influence also. They have their own way to try to bring someone against the other or like that. They have done it always historically, and they are still doing everywhere.
Correct.
So like we can see recently in Taiwan, the way they are influencing some of the legislator against the government, or even influencing the Trump administration for who is not allowing the Taiwanese president. So they are master. So Tibetans should be ready for this, and it's very, very important. I think in a statement, if you have the statement in front of you, he mentioned about remaining united. So that's a very, very important task for the Ganden Phodrang Trust to keep all Tibetan united during that long regency. Because whether you call it a regent or no regent, it is regency. And the British used to call it the minority.
Right.
Because with a capital M, because during at that time, no decision could be taken by the government in Lhasa, because the Kashak, the cabinet, were too nervous if they take a wrong decision. When the Dalai Lama become an adult, or he takes temporal and spiritual power, he could be criticized.
Right.
They could be criticized for some decision they have taken. So it brought paralysis. Everything was paralyzed for nearly 15 years. And that's really that was a big issue, because in 47, when India became independent, Tibet should have reaffirmed all the treaty that Tibet had with British India, means in particular the Shimla Convention and the McMahon Line. Right. But these ministers, they were too nervous to take any decision, and it took 1 year to reaffirm that there was a border with India, and it cost them very dearly later on. So that's a big issue, that during the time of the minority, who will take the religious decision, because there's no doubt that a kid with 10 or even 8, 9, 10, even if he's extremely bright, sometimes he doesn't have the views or the world perception to take the right decision for his nation. So that's an issue. So they will have to face this.
Right. And you have said on more than one occasion that His Holiness should make the details of the succession process known as soon as possible, because of the strategic implications that it would have. As things stand today, what do you feel should be known to those that are privy to the process or even public knowledge? What kind of details are you thinking of?
I think now, if they have, if His Holiness has decided to go for traditional reincarnation, I think the safest way would be later of prediction, like it has happened in the case most of the Karmapas. The previous Karmapa gives a letter,
right,
sometime in not understandable by any common man, but because the language they use, and but letter in which the area where it will come back, the village, the year, the parents, so that it's easy and there's no controversy. If it's not done, there'll be a controversy. Like today, we have a controversy for the Panchen Lama. We have a controversy for the Karmapa.
Yeah.
One of the 4 regents produced one letter of prediction, and another regent produced another one. So we have 2 Karmapa. Now they have met together and they seem they are in better terms. But that's not the ideal. That's why I was saying that that's all process, the reincarnation, which started by the first and the second Karmapa in the 12th century. Today, it needs to be more scientific. I mean, the Ganden Phodrang Trust cannot say all what they are doing and what they are. But people should have an indication so that it doesn't go wild also. So that's not easy, but His Holiness, if he give a very clear letter or message where he wants to come. Now, of course, he has a choice. One of the 4 trustees inducted has a lot of connection with Mongolia. So does he want to come back from Mongolia? Though that Lama, I think, is born in Tibet, in Xining, in Qinghai. But previous reincarnation had a lot of connections. The 3 others have only a connection with Tibet and with India. So he has to decide, because it will have always political implication. Wherever. If he goes in the West, it will have, of course, political implication. You have also to not to forget that today there's 1 million of Himalayan Indian national Himalayan Buddhists following the Nalanda tradition, following His Holiness. So if you take the people from Ladakh, from Kinnaur, from Lahore, Spiti, from Sikkim, and of course Arunachal Pradesh, Tawang, Menchuka, Lohit, and different places, you have 1 million people, or 9.6 or 9.7 millions, which is much more than the entire Tibetan diaspora, which may be 1.4 lakhs. So Dalai Lama today, he has said 2-3 times that he was a uniting factor, but not only for the Tibetan people, for the different Amdo,
right.
different province, but also for the Himalayan belt. So if suppose he decides to come back from Ladakh or from Arunachal or from Kinnaur, it will have also local political implications.
Yes.
I don't have to explain to you, but you'll see that.
Yeah, it's a possibility many Indian thinkers often ponder about and wonder what the consequences could be if that were to happen.
In my view, he should remain the Dalai Lama of the Tibetan, the Dalai Lama of the Himalayan, the 1 million Himalayan, Dalai Lama of the Mongolian, as well as the neo-Buddhist in the West. And he has to remain the factor uniting all these people, but he cannot exclude any. But it doesn't mean that there will be no politics, because whether today is purely a spiritual function that is playing, it remains highly political function. We see it today in Ladakh, and but that's a good side also, that even in one way, Sikyong can't take important decision without first discussing or referring to the Dalai Lama. There's no way about that. So it's not a democracy like we have in India or in the West, where the political leader can take whatever decision if it's followed by the parliament. I mean, if he gets the approval of the parliament. But in the case of the Tibetan system, even the Dalai Lama has relinquished his temporal power. He still have legitimacy of the elected leader would have to ask him for important decision. Of course, for small decision, he will run the central Tibetan administration on its own, but important decision he has to be referred to.
And now coming back to the forthcoming search, for instance, they might, the Ganden Phodrang Trust, at least the individuals on the trust that will participate, they might run into some logistical challenges. For instance, off camera, we were talking about the fact that at least in the previous searches, the lake Lamo Latso in Tibet was central to the searches. The people would go there, look for visions and get indicators and whatnot. Now, of course, they do not have access to this lake. Yet there do seem to be some reports of them trying to overcome this barrier. What have you heard about this?
I think there are many challenges, and China will try to use their own Panchen Lama, Gyatsen Nobu. And the other issue is, of course, the lake. I think the lake is part of the direction. It helps in a direction, but it's not something which has always been used. And the third thing is the urn, the Golden Urn. Right. So I will reply first to about the lake. Right. The lake, it has been useful for the 14th Dalai Lama when Rating went there in 1936 or 37. I don't remember exactly the year. And he had the pujas. He went with a large party. They do for a few days the pujas, and he saw the vision of the villages, the monastery with golden roofs, the house of Dalai Lama with this turquoise colored tiles, and he saw 3 letters, A, Ka, Ma. A is for Amdo. Ka is for Kumbum, the main monastery nearby, some few kilometers from the village. And Ma, we are not sure. Some people say because Dalai Lama was named Lamo, Tonduk Lamo, Ma. Or because there was some mountain where the fourth Karmapa visited in the past. So Karma, Pa, Ma. So we don't know. So my point is that it's not 100%. It's an indication.
Right.
And if again there's a proper letter of prediction, this lake verification could be bypassed. But that said, I think there is also other lakes. I have been visiting many places in Arunachal Pradesh, in Ladakh, in Himachal. There are many sacred lakes. I mean, we know about Guru Dongmar in Sikkim, where Guru Padmasambhava or Guru Nanak both went there. We know of Tsopema near Mandi, where Guru Padmasambhava again. Many of these lakes actually are linked with Guru Padmasambhava and many also with Guru Nanak. But there are many sacred lakes, empowered lakes. But I think nothing stops the Dalai Lama today to commission the empowerment of a special lake. If he finds a special lake, I believe there are some also closer to Dharamsala, but there are others higher in the Himalayas with less thousands of tourists around. Some very, very smaller lakes which are not known, but which are known by the local population as specially empowered lake. From that, I think the puja can be always done. One of the main protectors of the Dalai Lama is Panchen Lama. That empowerment of power of lakes, Panchen Lama can certainly be. But I will not speak much about that because it's not my. I don't have the knowledge to do. But I'm sure that there are possibilities. And I can tell you in Arunachal, for example, there's hundreds of lakes which the local population considers as empowered lake. So maybe some lakes could be empowered if it's required. Maybe it will not be required. And so hopefully this could be solved quite easily. And these four senior young Rinpoches are there to make sure that it will be done. And of course, Professor Sarnong Rinpoche is the senior most and he is there. And he knows very well Arunachal Pradesh also. So second issue is the urn. Now China is making a big fuss about this urn.
Right.
In 2007, they promulgated some regulation that the Chinese states has to decide. Now it's very ironic, it's very funny. We can only laugh because they are atheists, they are Buddhist. When Dalai Lama in 1954 went to Beijing, and Mao Zedong used to come in the evening to meet him in the guest house, he said many times, religion is a poison. So, and he said, you should develop Tibet. You forget about religion. Now, the same state wants to deal with religion and deal not only with religion, but very esoteric issues, right, like the reincarnation of a Lama. But the most ironic is that the way the Gyatsen Nobu, who is today the Chinese recognized Panchen Lama, were recognized by the Golden Urn. Now, what happened? There was when the 10th Panchen Lama passed away in 89 December. The search committee was organized from the Tashilumpo monastery, and when the Lama, the senior Lama, the abbot of Tashilumpo, Chatrel Rinpoche, right, he was asked to find out names. So he found 2-3 names, and he passed on clandestinely these names to Dharamsala. Now, Dharamsala immediately, through their own divination methods, found one boy who was the right one. And they announced it. The next day, Gedon Shaginima, the name of the boy, he was arrested, and since now more than 30 years, he is under house arrest. Nobody knows where he is, probably in Beijing. China says he is very well, he is doing his studies or he's working, he doesn't want to be known. That is not possible because because of security. If people would know that who he is, immediately there'll be Tibetan flocking in this place.
Right.
But Gyatsen Nobu, so a few days later, they said, we will do the Golden Urn. Now that Golden Urn, for 14 Dalai Lama, has been used only one time, for the 10th Dalai Lama. During that period that I earlier mentioned,
right,
between 1805 and 1875, when there was four Dalai Lamas. So it was used once. So but they said, let's use it for the reincarnation of the 10th Panchen Lama to find the 11th Panchen Lama. Now, unfortunately for China, one of the witness, very senior Lama from Labrang Tashikel in eastern Tibet, in Amdo, defected to the West a few years later, and he told the story of what really happened. They had 3 capsules in this urn, and someone is supposed to pick up one of the capsules and after doing necessary puja. Now, they had put a capsule which was much longer. So the person who picked up that capsule knew who is picking up. And that boy, Gyatsen Nobu, has a very good pedigree. His parents were good communists and they were quite safe.
Right.
Though both boys are from the same village, Lari, in Nakshu province, in Nakshu prefecture. So they know each other. But because of the capsule can be manipulated anytime. So it's just a joke when they go on and say that Golden Urn has to be used. So I think hopefully there'll be no need of Golden Urn. The 14th Dalai Lama has been recognized without any Golden Urn or any candidate. In some case, there's other candidates also who get also some titles and things, but which are not the real. So we can only hope that it will be smooth, but historically it has not always been smooth. And something is sure, that China will try, because politically it's very, very important for them to control the 15th Dalai Lama, because it's only small chance that they have to control the people of Tibet. Because if they don't control already Gyatsen Nobu, the 11th Panchen Lama, they may control him, but he has the legitimacy with the people of Tibet. If last week he was in Chamdo prefecture and he went to Nakshu prefecture, he visited. It was the time Li Xiang, the Chinese prime minister, came to Lhasa. Of course, even when Xi Jinping came in 2021, they managed to send him to some other outside Lhasa. So he went there, there's no photo. Or when there's a photo, you have 10, 15 people. You just look at the picture of His Holiness in Zanskar, or His Holiness in Leh, when he arrives in Leh, or when he gave his lecture. You have tens of thousands of people. This type of legitimacy, 15 Dalai Lama selected by China will never have. He will have 20, 30, 40 people like the Gyatsen Nobu. Right. They have really tried very hard to promote Gyatsen Nobu. And in fact, even Gyatsen Nobu, they are not sure. He was called beginning of June by Xi Jinping and 3 of his colleagues of the Standing Committee of the Politburo, means the bosses of the boss. Right. And he was giving a lecture that you have to be a good communist, you have to propagate Marxism in Tibetan masses, and you have to synthesize Buddhism. But why do they need to give a lecture? If he would,
so they're not sure if he's completely on board with their agenda.
Doing it. So.
Oh wow.
So even that, because if you look at the history of the 10th Panchen Lama, which is very different, very interesting. Right. This Panchen Lama is born also in Chining, at the edge of China, not far from where Dalai Lama is born.
Right.
And he is selected by China, grown by China. So the first years he sends letter to Mao Zedong to felicitate him for having taken over Tibet. And progressively he became an adult. and he rebelled against so in 1962, he wrote 70,000 character petition to Zhou Enlai. And he was in prison 2 years later, 17 years in prison. He was tortured, this public indictment, and he lost a hearing. But he had the courage.
These were very violent indictments, yes.
Till the end, though selected, groomed, educated by China, he had the courage to stand for the Tibetan values and the Tibetan people. He never criticized the party directly. He criticized what has been done wrong. And many people believe that in December of 89, he passed away because he spoke too frankly. So China today is not able to have 100% person, whether the Panchen Lama or Dalai Lama, who are 100% followers of the Marxists, like Xi Jinping is. And they have few puppets like Dorje Pamo, who was the third in the hierarchy of the yellow hat, the Gelugpa. She has been from the first day puppet of the communists, and she is in all communities. Eventually, she speaks from time to time, like when there were riots in Tibet, when the unrest, Tibetan revolted in 2008, she denounced the Dalai Lama. But otherwise, they are not religious leaders, and with a following. They are no following. There's another Lama called Pakpala. Since the age of 19, he has been in the Communist Party. He was one of the main collaborators from 59 downward. He is still in the communist hierarchy quite high, but he has no legitimacy in Tibet with the people. So that will be the same issue if they select their own 15 Dalai Lama. In my point of view, they will do it. They will go ahead and they'll do it. But it will have it will have only irrelevance compared to the one selected by Ganden Phodrang.
Okay, so just to be clear, when you're giving these examples, the collaboration that these individuals indulged in essentially cost them their religious legitimacy in a way. When you're talking about
China has always found people collaborating with them from the first years of their occupation. And what is, we don't mention it often, but in the history of modern Tibet, very often it's more the clergy, some of the monks, not all, but some of the monks who worked with China. But the masses were always totally against the Chinese occupation of Tibet. And if you take the uprising of March 10, 1959, which forced the Dalai Lama to leave Tibet and take refuge in India, it's the entire population of Lhasa. So Communist China speaks about the masses, but the masses revolted against. It's always the masses who revolted. But China never had difficulty also to find some people in the aristocracy, very few, but some in the clergy, among the three big monasteries in particular, who helped them, collaborated with them. So I mentioned Pakpala Rinpoche and Dorje Pamo are two of them.
Correct. And now, of course, when it comes to the government of India, it does not interfere in religious matters and so forth. Do you think the government of India can be more proactive when it comes to this issue, or should it be a completely hands-off approach?
No, the issue is that India is a secular country. It's enshrined in the Constitution of India, no?
Of course.
Some people may not agree, but it is there. So India is a secular. So India will not intervene in selection, like China shamefully does.
Right.
India will never say you should select that person or that person. At the same time, India has always been very helpful for the Tibetans. Today, when Dalai Lama goes to Ladakh, if he is flown by the Indian Air Force.
Right.
When he goes to Zanskar, he uses a helicopter of the Indian Air Force. Whenever he is going anywhere in India, in Delhi or in Bombay or anywhere, he is get the Z plus category from the government of India. So that's not small things. That's big thing, but not openly or doing a lot of noise about it. But it's some recognition. I was asking a foreign friend, America will give Z plus if Dalai Lama is born in the 15th Dalai Lama is born in America. I don't think today Mr. Trump will give any such a protection. To give Z plus category is not is something very special. I don't know, but maybe 30 people who have that category in India. So he's getting, so the government of India is doing this. And many other things but as far as intervening in the succession, Delhi will never do anything.
And that's the right move to make. Finally, I just wanted to, before we close, wanted to ask you this question, and perhaps you can deal with it briefly. You had written an article, perhaps, in which you mentioned that the world needs a Dalai Lama. Why do you believe that to be the case?
The world needs what the Dalai Lama represents. He represents, you see, today the world, everyone is fighting Ukraine and the Middle East. Now Cambodia and Thailand start fighting, and Mr. Trump is distributing tariff to everybody, and everyone is also doing his own thing. World is very divided, and China is doing a series of dams on the Yalong Sampo, with terrible implication for India. So world need leaders who can speak about peace and be an embodiment also of this. It's not enough to speak about it. All his life, Dalai Lama has followed his principle. And so I think the earth needs some peace. So otherwise, I don't know where the planet is going. First of all, for environment. I've been traveling a lot in northern India, in the border areas. I can see the difference with climate change. And in Sikkim, northern Sikkim, now you can't reach. The last 3-4 years, 2023, there was a big landslide, and because of some bluff, this glacial lake burst. And in Chuntang, that entire hydropower plant was burst. And every year, if you look at the number of roads which have been blocked in Himachal, in Kinnaur, Laol, Spiti, and in Sikkim, I was told that, you see, it used to snow. So the snow as a stabilizing factor. It stabilized the soil and everything. Now the snow is replaced by water. So the water washed away. So it has terrible effect. So I think the world should concentrate on sorting out these issues instead of really trying to fight and this. So that way, Dalai Lama has always fought for environment, for peace, for to understand each other. I always, I may say, I may not agree fully with the Dalai Lama when he put in his 4 commitments, he put Tibet the 3rd commitment. First commitment is for generating compassion, love, loving kindness for entire human beings. Second is for the religious dialogue. Third is Tibet. I feel, but I'm not. You should have put first Tibet, but because Tibet is important at every point of view for environment also. But okay, this is a choice. So, but they all come together in one way. Right. If you don't respect the environment, if you don't respect the other face of the others, and if you don't not able to bring what we call karuna, this part of the deep and old Tibetan tradition, and some of the qualities. So, but I'm saying karuna are important also, and there are other qualities in the Indian tradition, but these are important. It's what the Dalai Lama represents. So, more than the Dalai Lama, the planet needs the Dalai Lama. I think the planet needs what Dalai Lama represents today and what he has been preaching and what he has been practicing.
On that note, Mr. Arpi, thank you very much for your time and insights. I really, really appreciate it.
There is no solution, and we can only hope that he will live a very long time. So there will be no search committee or like that. But if he does something, it has to be some scientific, because in scientific way, His Holiness has really tried also to bring science and religion together. He has done numbers of workshops, seminars, and he has brought the top scientists. So it should also come in the succession process, some scientific way to do it, so that people also have cannot discuss or argue about it.
We certainly can hope so, and wait and watch for the future. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.